Members of the committee, thank you for the chance to be here today. I am Representative Julianne Young. I represent District 30, and it is my pleasure to bring to you today House Bill 421. Having clear definitions is critical to our ability to both communicate and to craft policy. And you see, I have a really huge, kind of intimidating stack of papers up here. This is not stuff that I'm going to bore you with for hours upon hours, but our good colleague, Representative John Gannon, asked at the print hearing for a list of times that these terms are used in statute. This is a printed version of the statutes which refer to the words which are defined in House Bill 421. When we do a search of code, we learn that the term male is used in code 54 times. The term female is used 88 times. The term father is used 147 times. And the term mother is used 133 times. Then the term gender shows up in statute 32 times. These are words that we have used in statute for decades based on a presumption that everybody understood what they mean. But I think that you will see from the testimony today that there is now question as to whether male means what we always have assumed it to mean, and whether female means what we have assumed it to mean, and also then by virtue of that question, whether mother, father, and some of these other terms mean what we have always assumed them to mean. Now, in presenting this bill, I want to be clear that I am not intending to take a position here on how any of those terms are applied in policy. How terms are applied in policy is a different question from how they are defined. But if they are not clearly defined, you are impeded in your ability to set policy. So that is the purpose of this bill today. And just to briefly walk you through the bill, because I know there is some testimony and I want to give people plenty of time. The meat of the bill begins on page 2. And the fundamental definitions are the definitions of male and female. So one of the things that this definition does for us is it ties those words to the reproductive function that they have intended to describe. So you'll see here, female means an individual who has, had, will have, or, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, would have the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes eggs for fertilization. You see that the definition takes into consideration the fact that we change over time, and that also there are circumstances where things turn out different for whatever reason. However, it still establishes a baseline understanding of what we mean when we say female. You'll notice that the definition for male follows a similar pattern. Then father, mother, girl, and boy are simply defined then in reference to our understanding of male and female. Now, one other part of this bill that is important is a legal definition for the word gender. And so in addressing that, I would like to just give you a little interesting etymology. Etymology is the study of words and their origins. So if you do a search on etymology online, you'll find that the term gen, G-E-N, is a word-forming element, technically meaning something produced. From the Greek, genus, G-E-N-E-S, meaning born of or produced by, which is the same source as genos, G-E-N-O-S, which means birth, or genea, Genea, race or family. Or if you go to the Proto-Indo-European root, gene meaning to give birth or to beget. You're seeing a pattern here. This term was first used in the late 18th century French chemistry, and we hear oxygen, Gen, there's that root again, meaning, and this was somewhat of a mistaken understanding, but meaning that which produces. Some other words that have a similar root would include genes, which are the basic unit of heredity, genetics, which is the study of heredity, generation, meaning a single step in the line of descent from an ancestor, or the act or process of bringing into being or producing offspring, and genesis, meaning the creation or coming into being. So now we see the etymology or the roots of gen, der as a suffix is appended to a word to create an agent noun indicating a person who does something. So when we look at the etymology of the word gender, we see that gender refers to a person's ability to create or to produce. In its roots, this term has always been understood to also refer to our reproductive function as individuals. So by also clearly tying the term gender to terms such as male and female, we are now able to have a clear policy discussion of what we mean, or a policy discussion that clearly communicates what we intend to say. Now, that is not to say that gender cannot be used as an adjective in other word combinations. So, but when we do that, we also clearly, again, communicate our message. This is important because in one judicial ruling, the judge, remember our old A equals B and B equals C discussion? Therefore, A equals C. The judge used the term gender synonymous with gender identity throughout the discussion of the issue, and then in the final ruling equated gender with sex. And so now sex became the equivalent of gender identity, completely eroding the ability to have a policy discussion based on a clear understanding. So this bill anchors those words in the law and gives us as policymakers the ability to craft good policy. Now, we do have some existing definitions of biological sex, which is a similar definition. However, that definition did not cut to the core of male and female, and I believe that this definition is more clear. And so as you look at that, you will see that we have amended those sections then to be consistent with this definition. And then one last thing I would like to just say, and then I'll be happy to answer questions. As you look at this bill, there have been some questions raised about disorders of sexual development. And I understand that those things exist, and I've talked to some of the doctors that work to help patients who struggle with those things. This definition is an overarching definition that gives a basic understanding of what we mean by male and female. That definition then becomes a tool to help us as we craft policy. You will notice as you look at the statutes that are included, the existing statutes that are included in this bill, that those statutes account for disorders of sexual development. And so it is as we craft policy with clear language that we then can take into consideration those exceptions which do exist, and do it in a way that is appropriate for that area of policy, because you may deal with those variations in different ways depending on the area of policy that you're addressing. So just the fact that we have a fundamental definition does not deny the reality of those things, and certainly should not impede our ability to address them in the law. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Young. Are there questions for Representative Young? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Young. So we're also changing the definitions of sex that are contained in two sections that are, well, maybe three. Two sections in this bill. And I'm wondering why, what the significance of the change is, first of all, and why two sections in the code were pulled out for a change in definition.
Representative, could you tell us what page line you're on as well for the edification of the committee?
Yes. It looks like page 3, line 21 through 24, and
Okay.
page 4, line 36 through 42, and then also sex is addressed on page 5, line 49 to 50, and then page 6 on line 1 through 3.
Perfect. Thank you. Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon. As I mentioned before, this previous definition of biological sex doesn't get down into the nitty-gritties of male and female. And I believe that this definition that is in this bill is more clear and concise even than what we adopted in these previous definitions. I will say that I carried one of these myself and helped to craft it, and that our good colleague Representative Skog carried one of the others. And as the individuals who worked on these pieces of legislation, we are completely comfortable that it doesn't undermine the intent or the effect of the statute in any way.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Young. Okay, so sex, as it's proposed to be defined, it means an individual's biological sex, either male or female. And I'm just thinking about the word biological. The definitions that we're repealing seem to go in a little more detail, talking about chromosomes and external and internal reproductive anatomy and genetically determined at conception, genetically recognizable at birth. Do you think that having a more very broad definition, just saying means an individual's biological sex is either male or female, we would be focusing on this word biological, and do you think that could create some discussion or arguments over what biological is or is not?
Representative Young.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, I'm not concerned about that. As I mentioned earlier, I think that tying it back to gametes is a more clear and concise way, and chromosomes and all of these other things are certainly associated.
Follow up.
And one other question, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Young. So, who exactly was consulted in forming the definitions and as they're contained herein, the new definitions?
Representative Young.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Gannon, I've had input both from the Heritage Foundation and from ADF.
Heritage Foundation. Thank you.
Yep. Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up comment for Representative Gannon, perhaps. I was the carrier of the 18-1506C. I support this language change and wish it had been, these definitions had been there when we ran that bill, H71. I think this is very helpful in future legislation. And let's see. Yeah, I just want to pass that on. So I'm grateful for this legislation coming forward.
Excellent. Thank you. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Young, I love the science bill. I feel like this is coming straight from science class. So my question is, page 2, line 19, you say a boy means a minor human male. I guess I understand why you put human there. I'm just curious why, when you do female or mother, you don't use human. And can you explain, like for female, you say it means an individual. Is there a definition of individual?
Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Scott. Great question. And, it's interesting all the nuances that you discover when you start drafting legislation. If you take the time to look in your drive and look at all the different references to male and female, you'll find that many of those references are even part of managing livestock and those kinds of issues. And so we use the terms male and female to refer to a variety of organisms, where boy and girl as terms are specific, as you said, to humans.
Organisms, eh?
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Young. We have 15 individuals signed up to testify today. We are going to try to get through all those. We'll give each of them 2 minutes. We intend to take action on this legislation by at least 10:45 today and vote it up, vote it down, whatever. So at this time, we'll start our in-person testimony. Emily Jackson Edney, followed by Nixon Matthews. State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Mr. Chairman and committee, my name is Emily Jackson Edney. My testimony is strong opposition to H 421, which seeks to exclude gender identity as a recognized identifying characteristic in statute. Such legislation poses a significant threat to the principles of equality, fairness, and individual autonomy. As an unapologetic woman of transgender experience, this legislation poses a personal threat to my humanity and to my fundamental right of dignity, well-being, equal opportunity, and safety in this state. By limiting the definition of sex to only biological male and female, this legislation overlooks the diversity of gender identities that exist beyond the binary framework. Excluding gender identity as a valid identifying characteristic perpetuates discrimination against transgender individuals. It denies them the basic right to legal recognition and reinforces harmful societal norms, leading to increased marginalization and a lack of protection under the law. Gender identity is a complex interplay of biological, social, and personal factors. It is essential to recognize that it plays a crucial role in the shaping an individual's experiences and should not be dismissed or invalidated by legislation. A more inclusive approach and acknowledging the spectrum of gender identities aligns with the evolving understanding of sex and promotes a society that respects and protects the rights of all of its members. H 421 legislation contradicts the constitutional affirmation by the United States Supreme Court's landmark decision in Bostock in 2020, which declared that discrimination based on gender identity constitutes discrimination based upon the definition of sex under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This ruling recognizes the interconnectedness of sex and gender identity and reinforces the need for inclusive legal frameworks. I urge this committee to consider the broader implications of this legislation on the well-being and the rights of transgender individuals in this state. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Emily. Are there questions for Emily today? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, Nickerson Matthews, followed by Rachel Bassett. Bassett? Good morning. Welcome to House State Affairs. State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
My name is Nixon Matthews. I live in Boise, Idaho, in District 16, and I am here in strong opposition to HB 421. So I'm going to make this personal. I often introduce myself as your happy, fulfilled trans neighbor, because that's who I am. I'm your neighbor. I'm your constituent, the person you might pass in the grocery store or on the Greenbelt. I am Idahoan, born and raised. And not only am I happy and fulfilled much of the time, I'm also proud to be a trans person. However, this bill would effectively erase my existence and the existence of others in my community. It's more than just problematic. It's harmful and disregards decades of scientific, medical, cultural, and academic consensus. And if passed, it will most certainly lead to another costly lawsuit that our taxpayers pay for. But I'm here to focus on the language that was used when HB 421 was introduced and today, because words matter. This bill was positioned under the guise of simplification of language regarding sex and gender. But for someone like me and many others in our community, understanding and embracing our gender identity is often a lifetime journey of self-discovery, resilience, and joy. But on days like today, it's a struggle, not because of who we are, but because of bills like this. And this is why the concept of simplification is dangerous. For you, these might be words, but for us, this is our identity. And if passed, it would have profound impact, everyday consequences leading to intolerance and discrimination simply for existing. And worst of all, it sends a clear message to thousands of trans, non-binary, and intersex Idahoans that we are nothing, not even worthy of recognition. Bills like HB 421 only serve to complicate and harm lives. It benefits nobody. It is not a matter of simplicity. It is our humanity, and I urge you to oppose this bill.
Thank you, Nixon. Are there questions for Nixon? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't have to answer this, but I think you probably will. So how would you define man, woman, boy, or girl, any one of those?
Nixon, if you care to respond, you're welcome to. If you would prefer not to, you can just decline. It's your choice.
I think that we live in a world where we have seen an opportunity to be expansive. I think by limiting it, it reduces the ability for people to identify in a way that is true to us. And that I think this is not our job to be able to decide how people identify. Our job is to focus on day-to-day issues that impact Idahoans' lives. So that's my statement on that question.
Any further questions? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Nixon, there's a physiological condition called intersex.
Yes.
And I'm interested in a little more information on that and how that would fit in these definitions. If you can help, or maybe another speaker can help.
Nixon?
I am not a doctor, so I'm not going to speak specifically to some of the details around being intersex, but I can say that this legislation does deny the fact that there are differences in biological differences from the time that we are born, that people do not fall into a binary physically, literally. And so by creating a binary that is very strictly binary, it does negate the existence of people who do not physically fit inside of a binary.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Nixon, just so I understand and everybody understands, by binary, what do you mean? Could you...
Nixon?
When we're talking about a binary, we mean having reproductive organs or chromosomes, or there's a variety of things. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to get into too much detail. But the reality is there is not this binary that is being suggested, literally, in medical expertise.
Yep. Any further questions? Nixon, I have a question for you. So I coach girls basketball, middle school girls basketball. Coached the girls for 5 years. They're in 8th grade now. Mm-hmm. And this year, as we were practicing, they want to know if we could have the 8th grade boys basketball team practice against them. So we did that, and there is vast differences. The girls were having a difficult time getting the pass over the defense because the boys jump higher. We were having a difficult time boxing out because the boys are stronger. So when you're dealing with issues, you said, hey, it's not the responsibility of this body. We need to deal with everyday issues. That's an everyday issue for me personally if one of those boys decided that he wants to play on the team. So what's your advice for us as policymakers in those type of situations? That's an everyday situation that we deal with, that potentially I would have a girl that wouldn't be able to make that team because the boy would take her spot. How do I deal with that situation from your perspective?
Stay out
I
of
want
the
to separate
frame.
practice, first of all, from what is happening, because we're making a big deal out of something that should not be a big deal. The other aspect of this that I want to talk about is HB 71 was introduced. It was passed. Luckily, we have an injunction on this. But first of all, we're limiting the ability at a young age for people to make decisions about their bodies, and yet then we also hold them accountable for wanting to participate in life as their gender identity. I'm getting a little away from the question here.
Oh, you're fine. I'm just trying to figure out how I talk to that girl that is my 9th or 10th player that didn't make the team, and I have to tell her a boy that transitioned, that wants to be a girl, was able to secure a spot because he is stronger, he is quicker, he jumps higher. How do I break that news to her? Because there's a lot at that's a tender age for kids. And so there's a lot that goes into that as a coach. So how do I deal with her parents and her as an athlete that she lost that spot on the team?
I'm going to correct your language. What you're talking about is a trans girl participating in sports, and trans girls should have the opportunity to participate in sports. And what I'll do is I'm going to share a bunch of studies and documents with you after I get done here.
Okay.
That speaks to this very issue, that does a very good job of explaining why this is not the issue that we're making it. And I think that's going to be a little bit more effective than me right now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony today. Rachel Bassett, followed by Merrick Collins, followed by Sam Sandemeyer. Rachel, state your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Rachel Bazette. I'm in District 16. I am a licensed mental health provider based here in Boise. As someone who works primarily with Idaho's LGBTQ+ community in my practice, I would like to voice my opposition to this bill due to its inevitably damaging impacts on the lives of so many people in our state. The language that this legislation proposes will minimize or erase the experience of trans, gender expansive, and intersex Idahoans. In therapy sessions on a weekly basis, I work with people who are addressing issues related to their identity, their life experiences, and the ways that they must navigate the world. For many folks, we are doing therapy related to daily challenges, and their identity is only a small piece of what we are addressing. But much of the work that we do around identity is related to the pain and trauma related to experiences with diverse and marginalized identities. The important thing to note about the pain that I see related to gender in sessions is that there is seldom actual distress about identity. People know who they are, and being able to discover ways to live authentically brings joy and meaning, and it saves people's lives. Nearly always, the challenges are related to the ways that transphobic language, systems, and beliefs negatively impact their ability to happily and peacefully live their lives and feel acceptance. And that is what this bill perpetuates. Every time a bill on this topic has come up over the last few years, I see in sessions increased levels of depression, increased levels of anxiety, increased levels of suicidality, and feelings of despair about whether or not this is a place that my clients and people in my community can continue to call home. Codifying this harmful and incorrect language that makes sex and gender synonymous indicates to people in our community that the state does not see them, does not care for their health or safety, and does not care about their lived experiences. This bill causes harm, and even in this moment, the fact that there is a discussion in our government about this language is causing harm. Please
Rachel,
oppose this bill.
Okay, perfect. It's going right on cue. Did a perfect job. Any questions for Rachel? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Merrick Collins, followed by Sam Sandemeyer, followed by Kellen Brown. Merrick?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Merrick Collins. I am a voter of Legislative District 16, representing myself and the Trans Homing Project, and I am testifying in opposition to HB 421. Starting with the transgender issues, this bill is a denial of real research done by organizations such as the National Library of Medicine, and a denial of the real experiences that trans people such as myself have. Taking testosterone is one of the best decisions I have ever made in my life, and I haven't regretted it for a second. Look at my proud beard. Listen to my deepened voice. I am a man. To consider me forever a woman despite all of this, to make me use women's facilities and group me with women legally and socially is an insult to myself and to women. I tried to be a girl, to be a woman, for the majority of my life, but becoming a man has opened my eyes and made me whole. I have identified as a man for 7 years, and going on testosterone 4 years ago was, as I said, one of the best decisions I have ever made. Most people who are born female do not and would never feel this way, and that's okay for them. Women are women, men are men. And people who are neither women nor men are neither women nor men. To deny the experiences of people who have crossed the lines of gender and sex is to call our senses of self incorrect and worse, to spit upon the doctors and scientists that research our condition and prove time and time again that gender incongruence is real and best treated with acceptance and understanding. Intersex people are also being attacked. Page 1, line 4 states that rare disorders of sexual development are not exceptions to the binary nature of sex. This is a contradiction. If someone does have such a rare disorder, then their sex is clearly not binary. If the disorder of sexual development causes no physical problems for the newborn baby, then there is no benefit to removing healthy tissue and organs from such a child, as many doctors do. In fact, to do so would often cause difficulties for the child later in life, as stated in a 160-page report titled, "I Want to Be Like Nature Made Me, Medically Unnecessary Surgeries on Intersex Children in the U.S." This bill is not only in opposition to worldwide medical and scientific consensus, it is an attack on the dignity of intersex and transgender people.
I need you to wrap it up. You're out of time.
I am one sentence away. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Vote no on HB 421. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Chairman. I am open to questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from Eric? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Sam Sandemeyer, followed by Kellen Brown, then followed by Joanna Schaefer. Sam, welcome to House State Affairs.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Crane and committee. My name is Sam Sandmeyer. I live in Boise, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I'm going to skip most of my testimony and leave time for those who have lived experiences. Other than to say, I urge you to reject House Bill 421. Intersex people do exist. I had the opportunity to meet with an intersex Idahoan from Pocatello named Sydney Madsen, who signed up to testify remotely today. Sydney served as a page in this building a few years ago, and I hope we all get a chance to hear Sydney's testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. The plan is today is to get virtual testimony in. So she's on the list here. So
Thank you.
Kellen Brown, followed by Joanna Schaefer. I'm sorry, were there questions for Sam? Seeing none, you're good. You're good. Kellen, followed by Joanna Schaefer, followed by Sarah Lawal. Kellen, state your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Good morning. My name is Kellen Brown. I am a resident of Boise, Idaho, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself today. I'm here to speak out against HB 421. Facts don't care about your feelings. This is a sentiment I hear often from Republicans, and today, in regard to this specific bill, that statement is true. The fact is, biological sex is not limited to the male and female binary. Just ask the millions of intersex people that live on this planet. The fact is, gender diversity has always existed in many cultures around the world. If you research Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, you'll find she was actually Elagabalus, a Roman empress and a trans woman. Polynesian and Native American cultures recognize third genders such as the Ray and Two-Spirit. The fact is, the narrow definitions of mother and father in this bill could have devastating effects on families with same-sex parents. Idaho claims to want to protect and save children, but this bill could directly contradict those claims. The fact is, this bill is unconstitutional and conflicts with binding interpretations of federal protections under the U.S. Constitution, Title IX and Title VII specifically. The fact is, this bill is a blatant attempt to erase transgender people, non-binary people, and anyone who is gender non-conforming. Women are not livestock, and trans people have always existed and will always exist. You will never silence us, and all of these facts don't care about your feelings.
Thank you, Kellen. Are there questions for Kellen? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Joanna Schaefer, followed by Sarah Lawal, followed by Amy Dundon.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, may I please request an additional minute and 45 seconds? I believe it'll evade the need for additional questions.
I'm sorry. We set the rules right at the beginning. It's 2 minutes for everybody,
Okay,
and that's
thank you.
we treat everybody with the same protocols here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I speak for myself and from my experience. I'm against this bill because it is inadequate in its depiction of reality and is scientifically unsound. Moreover, it is unsound in principle according to the biblical testimony of the living Messiah, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, Son of God. You'll know that my faith is very important to me, as well as a God-given right to experience life the way that I experience it, and to investigate the world through science. I've studied science, and in my pursuit of science as both earth scientist, anthropologist, I've also studied science as a health scientist doing massage therapy work. That has tied me very closely to my faith. As Christ was a healer, I feel that I have been living a life as a healer. I've also been a soldier in the Army Reserves for the last 4.5 years, and everything that I do is summarized by the Army values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Integrity and personal courage is what brought me to changing these things in my life and pursuing the established medical treatments that are beneficial for transgender people. I feel that the language that's used in this bill is restrictive and is also incomplete in its definitions, and that it is important that if there is to be clarifying language defined for forming policy, that it should be more thorough and inclusive and comprehensive. I feel like the best representative measurement of who a person is through their neurology. Currently, we measure what a person may be in utero through ultrasound technology, but otherwise, we don't really have any reliable way of measuring who a person is by their neurology, except from their lived experience and how they report to others who they are.
Joanna, you've ran out of time.
Thank you.
Okay, no, that's okay. Do you have maybe a summary you'd like to give us there?
I swore an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution and uphold the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Bill of Rights, and everyone's own freedom to live a moral life. This bill does not uphold those values and principles and must not be codified into law, as it is an overreach of government and an invasion of our civil liberties. As a soldier and a citizen and a devout follower of Christ, I cannot abide by this tyranny that so flagrantly defies God's wonderful creations. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions for Joanna? Representative Crane, 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Joanna, for being here. As a follower of Christ, looking at Genesis 1, verse 27, it says that he created them male and female. How do you square that?
Joanna?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Crane. I had the privilege of having a Bible study with a Messianic rabbi who we spent a 7-hour period discussing just, I think, the first half of Genesis, maybe I think even just the first 7 verses, which he then led us to understand through his translations from Hebrew and Greek, were that everything that God created in the 2 creation accounts that are given to us in the book of Genesis, that there are binaries. God speaks of creating night and day, land and air and ocean, but when we take a look at the natural world, we understand that there are things that are in between those things. And so when the Bible says that God created man and woman, and is not a word that is restricting to a binary understanding of those 2 terms, but is instead a spectrum. It is from man to woman. And we can see that based on our ability to sexually reproduce, there are structures in the human body that are natural to a man or a woman that allow us to reproduce. But I also believe that our ability to create and reproduce is beyond just our ability to sexually reproduce. We as human beings are endowed with the ability to create things other than just offspring. And I think that's also representative in creation.
Follow up?
Yeah.
So, using biology, does a bull or a cow produce offspring?
Joanna?
The bull and the cow produce offspring together.
Correct. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony today. Next up is Sarah Lawal, followed by Amy Dundon, and then our last in person is Dylan Goldell. I hope I said that right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Crane and committee members. I'm the Reverend Sarah Lawal. I serve as the minister of the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I'm here on behalf of myself, my church, and a number of other interfaith communities whose traditions unequivocally affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people, however they identify, and who openly and wholeheartedly welcome trans and non-binary people into our congregations. And many of our denominations have trans and non-binary people serving as clergy and in positions of leadership. And from that place, I have many deep concerns about the language in this bill. And I'm also here as the mother of an 18-year-old, beautiful trans daughter named Juniper. And I am heartbroken and so angry that the language of this bill seeks to utterly dismiss and disregard her identity, and that of so many in our community, many we've heard from today. To suggest that our beloveds cannot self-identify does not, in fact, make things more equal, but erases them out of the equation altogether. And as a pastor, I believe these identities are a beautiful part of creation, most especially if we believe in Imago Dei, that we are all of us created in God's image, and God called that creation good. Nowhere is that more evident than in the courage and beauty of our trans and non-binary community. I do not understand what the state's compelling interest is in this bill. And as a minister and a pastor, I come here again to make a religious plea, because it is clear to me that this law is religiously based, privileging one religious doctrine, one theological claim above all others. And you know this religious doctrine is not shared by all faith traditions. It is not even shared among all Christian traditions. And it is a slippery slope and concerning to me when public officials seek to govern by their own religious authority. That kind of religious overreach is exactly what the framers of the Constitution were trying to prevent when they codified the separation of church and state,
Sarah,
because they had lived it.
Can you wrap it up?
Thank you. This bill ignores that separation, denies religious freedom, and I ask you to vote no. Thank you.
Are there questions? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious. I don't care if you answer the question or not, but I think maybe you would like to. So I'm not familiar with your church or background, really. You shared a little bit of the title of your church. What is the objective foundation of your faith, if you could share that?
Sarah.
Well, I believe I said it in my statement. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and in justice and compassion and mercy.
Follow up?
If I may, I like a little bit of theology, but what is the objective basis that you go to get to that, if you would?
Sarah?
I don't quite understand the question. I'm sorry, Representative Skog.
Rephrase that question, maybe.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. If I may, is there a scripture or something you rely on for that?
We actually draw from a variety of sources of wisdom for truth, and it is the foundation of our faith that we believe that truth and revelation is not sealed, but is continually unfolding, much like gender.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you. Next up, Amy Dundon, followed by Dylan Godell, and then we will do virtual testimony, and then I'll check back in if there's anybody here in the audience that would like to testify. Amy, welcome to House State Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes for public testimony.
Thanks. My name is Amy Dundon. I'm here representing the ACLU of Idaho, and I'm here to explain our firm opposition to House Bill 421. The legislative intent, which is on Section 1, Page 1, lines 11 through 36, asserts that, quote, increasing confusion about the relationship between sex and gender, coupled with the definitional confusion and ambiguities about gender, can threaten civil liberties, including equal protections under the law. However, we see clear flaws in this bill that, rather than alleviate such issues, may create or exacerbate ongoing threats to the rights of certain Idahoans. The ACLU opposes HB 421 specifically because, number one, the bill adopts a very restrictive and essentializing definition of the terms sex and gender. It will apply these definitions to code, to laws, and to the entire Idaho policies. The bill may also violate the Idaho Constitution. It codifies gender and sex in ways that depart from their ordinary and standard meanings. And it would have, most importantly, devastating consequences for transgender, non-binary, and intersex people in our state. The bill's novel and narrow statutory definitions, if enacted, would deny legal recognition and protections to transgender people. This narrow and exclusionary definition, the one that the bill presents, is markedly similar to legislation across the United States, including in Kansas, in Montana. And in those states, this type of legislation is now tied up in what's certainly will be lengthy and expensive litigation.
Amy, your time's expired. Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, thank you. I urge you to vote no on the bill.
Okay, perfect. Are there questions for Amy? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Dylan, state your name, who you represent, and we'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Hello, my name is Dylan Goldade. My last name is sort of made up as a lot of words are. I am a registered Republican, District 16, cisgendered, assigned male at birth, and I am against HB 421. I'm representing myself. I didn't say that already. This bill will harm and lead to the harm of trans Americans in 3 specific ways. First, it uses biased language such as rare disorders and increasing confusion, page 1, lines 18 and 22. Secondly, it does not justify nor explain its own emergency, page 6, line 37. If there is an emergency, what is it? If there is such an emergency, why the July 1st deadline? Why not sooner? And also, how and when does someone's gametes affect their individual efforts to enjoy equal protection under the law? Page 1, line 26. Finally, this bill does not even name what it seeks to eradicate definitionally. The word transgender and the word non-binary do not appear anywhere in this legislation. It says this definition shall not apply when gender is used in conjunction with other words or as an adjective to modify other words. That's page 2, line 29. Seems like a way to dance around the word transgender. Finally, I wanted to respond to 5 quick responses to what folks were saying earlier. 1, Representative Young mentioned people's assumptions. I would posit that we cannot legislate people's assumptions. Secondly, I don't believe etymology always informs meaning. As Representative Young said, we change over time. Also, the judge that made that ruling, I don't believe intended to erase the word sex from definition from the vocab. When we craft policy with clear language, that does not require this work or taxing
Dylan,
using tax money.
You're out of time, so I'll need you to wrap it up.
Sure. And then in response to your question about sports, this is a perfect opportunity to find new ways that we can talk about and qualify people for sports. If it's testing for hormones or other methods, perhaps that is the legislation we could put forth instead of changing definitions of words. So to conclude, HB 421 sets the stage for further erasure of transness from existence, from definition to eventually corporeal eradication. I cede my time, no questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Dylan? Seeing none, thank you very much. Sam Sandemeyer, there was someone that you referenced that you would like. What was her name? And I'll call on her first. Sydney Madsen. Okay, we're going to go to virtual testimony. Sydney Madsen will be up first. Sydney, are you there? All right, there we go. Sydney, welcome to House State Affairs. You'll have 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Excellent. Well, can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Thank you. I am from District 29 and I'm representing myself as an intersex Idahoan. I refute House Bill 421 on the grounds that it lacks factual basis, it will harm Idahoans if passed, and it demeans existing Idaho code. Fictitious claims begin in the bill in Section 1, Line 13, quote, in human beings there are two and only two sexes, male and female, unquote. Mind you, we have over 4,000 years of historical record describing the existence of intersex people. Additionally, in modern times, we have countless case studies and medical records that document our traits and our distinction from both males and females. Over a dozen states within the U.S. have already recognized non-binary sex designation on birth certificates. And I stand in front of you today as an individual testifying that I am intersex and I am not the only intersex Idahoan affected negatively by this bill. Despite the insinuation in Section 1, Line 22, my biological sex is not a source of confusion or opinion. My body exists naturally as a contradiction to the standard traditional binary. I was born with intersex qualities that require treatment, as well as some qualities that do not require treatment. I did not decide to be intersex in the same way that no one in that room decided to be born male nor female. A highly regarded study on the prevalence of intersex people indicates that about 2% of the global population is intersex. Yet, this bill purports that the rarity of intersex conditions is sufficient reason to deprive us of our 14th Amendment rights to life and liberty. By that rationale, you'll be taking the rights of people with green eyes next, seeing as they also represent approximately 2% of the population. My point being that rarity is a pitiful justification for inequitable legislation. Intersex people and our supporters will not stand for it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sydney. Are there any questions? Representative Gannon has a question for you, Sydney.
Thank you. And Ms. Madsen, could you, and I don't want to know about you personally, but in general, what is meant by intersex? And you don't have to go in real graphic detail, but just give us an idea of what that is.
Sydney?
Of course. Yeah, it's a great question, and I will reference actually the current definition of sex within Idaho State Code, which references a combination of chromosomes, physical presentations, and hormones as being what we use to determine biological sex. There are established norms for males and females in each of these categories in a variety of ways. Individuals who are born or develop through pubescence, qualities that are outside of the norm, are intersex people. Some qualities, just as an example, would include like gynecomastia, clitoromegaly, adrenal hypoplasia, if I'm saying that correctly. There's a myriad of conditions, so we're all quite different.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Sydney. Oh, I'm sorry. Sydney, can you hang on there? I was a little quick. Representative Gannon does have a question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Madsen. And you described some conditions there, but they're very technical terms. What just in everyday language, what do we mean by those terms?
Of course, yes. So clitoromegaly is when someone who's probably assigned female at birth will have a clitoris that is larger than average, so much so that it begins to represent more of a phallus, again creating this non-binary physical appearance. That's one of the conditions that does not require treatment. It's just a natural part of our biological sex sometimes. For me personally, the one that I had that required surgery was a microperforate hymen, which was a lack of full development of a vaginal opening. So that's just a couple of examples of the hundreds of variations in biological sex that occur naturally.
Any further questions? Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up will be Carmen, followed by Jasmine, followed by Sean, followed by William.
Good morning. I'm Carmen Brewster, a Boise resident, opposing House Bill number 421. As scripture you follow reminds us, there is no Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. That is Galatians 3:28. Our Constitution underscores unalienable rights for all. This bill denies that. Romans 14:13 advises placing stumbling blocks. Yet this bill does just that. It targets 6.7% of Idaho's population, approximately 127,300 people that identify as intersex, transgender, or non-binary. These conditions can result in hormonal variations affecting the production and function of what she's trying to define, Representative Young, that scientific term. It also plays into the definition of intersex people. This bill oversimplifies the concept of sex and gender, overlooking intersex variations of people. It interferes with informed decisions, risking adverse health outcomes for people, perpetuates stereotypes, introduces legal challenges, and disregards the evolving understanding of gender. I played boy sports, by the way, and it let me understand the realities of living in a world where you are judged by talent and not gender. The bill creates legal challenges, exposing individuals to discrimination, and it neglects the growing understanding of gender and increases the risk of self-harm due to a lack of support. The bill poses significant challenges in insurance, adoption, education, societal acceptance, and affects minorities groups even more. It fails to provide comprehensive legal protection, post-procedures, and restricts vital education and institution, overlooking the importance of adequate training for medical information. By failing to acknowledge insights from genetics, neurobiology, and endocrinology, this bill is going to complicate so many people's lives. I understand I ran out of time, but I'm going to ask you to vote no because this is an inhumane bill.
Thank you, Carmen. Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Next up is Jasmine Lindsay, followed by Sean Kraft, and then finally William Mitchell. Welcome to House State Affairs.
Good morning, Chairman Crane, members of the committee. My name is Jasmine Lindsay, and I am the Eastern Idaho Field Organizer for Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates Idaho. We strongly oppose House Bill 421, a bill that falsely conflates gender to sex and denies the existence of trans, non-binary, and intersex people. This bill would force LGBTQ people to live a lie and put them at risk of harm by disclosing the sex they were assigned at birth on documents like driver's licenses and marriage licenses. I once again just want to send so much love to all of the transgender folks and their loved ones who are being forced to stand up in front of a room of people and defend their right to exist. No matter how many attacks lawmakers throw at us, we are here to tell you loud and clear that trans, non-binary, and intersex people cannot be erased and that our voices cannot be silenced. By equating sex and gender solely with biological sex, this bill erases the lived experiences of trans and non-binary people and completely denies the existence of intersex people. Moreover, the bill defines male and female based solely on reproductive capabilities, ignoring the many ways in which individuals' bodies exist and the diverse ways that people express their gender. This bill will undoubtedly create confusion, and the implications of this legislation are far-reaching and will have devastating consequences. Trans and non-binary people would be forced to disclose their sex assigned at birth anytime they use their license, such as traveling, applying for a job, or going out to a restaurant or bar. This not only violates their right to self-identify, but also exposes them to even more potential harm and violence. A study conducted by UCLA shows that trans people are 4 times as likely than cisgender people to be victims of violent crime, and nearly half of trans people have been harassed or assaulted due to their identity. A bill like HB 421 will only exacerbate the violence and harassment that LGBTQ people face or experience by forcing them to disclose their sex assigned at birth. Moreover, the bill could harm same-sex couples and their children. By narrowly defining mother and father, it could inadvertently exclude same-sex couples, potentially harming the legal recognition and rights of these families, such as receiving tax credits and other social benefits. The truth is, this bill forces individuals to conform to rigid and draconian gender norms, jeopardizing their rights, safety, and well-being in the process. I urge you to consider the human cost of this bill and oppose HB 421, ensuring that Idaho is a state that respects and protects the dignity of all of its residents, including the LGBTQ community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Are there questions for Jasmine? Seeing none. Jasmine, I do have a question for you. So you talked a little bit about identity. So is it your position that an individual should be allowed to identify as whatever or whoever they want to identify as?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I should also note that I am a substitute, and I can have my director, Misty Dilly Carpini-Tolman, follow up with you with any further questions.
Okay. I think I saw her walk in here today, so I'm going to open it up for the audience in case she wants to testify. Thank you, Jasmine. Next up will be Sean Kraft.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay, here I am.
Yep.
As said by the chairperson, I am Sean Kraft.
Welcome back,
Present
Sean.
myself. Hello. I am against this bill. I thank the committee for seeing me, but I truly hope that you see myself and others for who we truly are and have always been. I am a non-binary person. I may not have always had the language to express such, but my experience has always been one between two genders. For some of you, this may be confusing, so allow me to simplify it. I grew up playing with Barbies with the gals and having dirt clod fights with the guys. I feel pretty in makeup and I deadlift 360 pounds. I have a feminine soul, a masculine body, and a mind that finds balance between those two aspects of myself. To remove language from the state laws is to erase people like myself. People. People are who this bill affects. My trans allies, my gender fluid allies, people born intersex, and my non-binary siblings. These people are your neighbors, community members, and constituents, not special interest groups. Recent polling shows that 1 in 5 Gen Z, 4 out of 25 millennials identify as LGBTQ people. We have friends and family. This means you will lose a massive amount of votes in the future. This is who you will have to look in the eyes as we question the hate that may be in your hearts driving such a bill. We won't magically disappear if you cancel us.
Sean,
As though
Sean, you're not going to be able to use terms like impugning the motives that she brought the bill because of hate in her heart. We don't know why she brought the bill. So make sure you talk to the bill.
Apologies.
That's okay. We just try to maintain decorum here. I paused your time, so I'm not taking your time here, but just letting you kind of know how the decorum works in my committee. So go ahead.
Not a problem. We won't magically disappear if you cancel us through legislative means. We just will vote you out when the time comes to do so. And we'll do so looking fabulous. We have been here, we'll always be here, and we will continue to be queer. And you should be used to that by now.
All right.
And that's what I have.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sean. Are there questions for Sean? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Final one virtually signed up to testify is William Mitchell from Nampa. William, state your name, who you represent. We'll have 2 minutes for you today for public testimony.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm William Mitchell, a registered lobbyist and policy counsel representing Legal Voice, a Pacific Northwest 501c3 legal organization that advocates for gender and racial justice. We oppose House Bill 421 for the following simple reasons. First, House Bill 421 is contrary to prevailing law. It violates the federal Constitution, and if anyone is unclear here or in the audience, I invite you to study briefly the 14th Amendment, which discusses equal protection. Supreme Court rulings such as Justice Gorsuch's majority opinion of Bostock versus Clayton County reinforce the legal principles that laws of any kind shall not discriminate on the basis of gender or sex. House Bill 421 fails this test. This bill, should it take the force of law, is so contrary to precedent that it invites yet another costly lawsuit at the expense of the taxpayers. And it's time for fiscal conservatives to stop giving oxygen to constitutionally infirm lawmaking. House Bill 421 is contrary to bill drafting standards. It violates the single subject rule in Idaho by conflation of the subjects of sex and gender and applying those terms improperly across several controversial new areas of Idaho code. And as the bill sponsor indicated at introduction of the bill, there are some who have difficulty navigating this issue in regard to policy. The Legislative Services Offices, on the other hand, tackled that policy rather easily. This body's very own legislative drafting manual, available just down the hall at the LSO, is very clear that any proposed legislation with references to gender or race should aspire toward gender neutrality. Just say person. This bill is the antithesis of legislative drafting standards on this point. House Bill 421 is also contrary to contemporary understanding of human psychology. The bill seeks to define medical and psychological terms in ways that necessarily limit the full enjoyment of American civic life and deprive trans and non-binary people their rights to life, liberty, and happiness. I urge you to vote on House Bill 421.
Okay, perfect. Great job. Any questions for William? Seeing none, thank you. That completes all that we had that were signed up. Is there anyone in the audience today that would like to testify? Come right ahead. So my eyes were not deceiving me. I did see you walk in, Misty.
We're not. You did.
All right. State your name, who you represent. We'll have 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Crane and members of the committee. My name is Misty Deli Carpini Tolman. I'm actually going to represent myself. I think Jasmine did a great job representing Planned Parenthood's stance on this bill, but I couldn't remain silent because this is a really near and dear issue to my heart. I have a lot of trans friends, family, and loved ones who are already experiencing a lot of distress just since this bill was introduced. And so I want you to know that this does not just carry with it the possibility of harming a community, but it already is harming a community by causing them fear and stress and worry over the future of their lives. I was listening on my way in this morning from a doctor's appointment, and so I also wanted to address something that you had asked of Nixon, and I know that he's going to get you some stats and some studies, and I'm sorry if I'm stumbling through this a little bit, but I also wanted to say that I know that there have been a handful of situations in women's sports where there has been a trans woman competing, but I want you to know that the larger thing that happens is that trans people are too afraid to try to compete. They're too afraid to put, even if they wanted to bring that spotlight upon them and the vitriol of the country that happens to these trans women when they try to compete in sports. And I will tell you that my wife got her PhD in sex and gender studies, and what I've learned from her while she was getting her PhD is that there is as much variation within each sex as there is between them. I played high school sports. I beat a lot of girls out for a lot of volleyball spots and basketball spots, and that will continue to happen. And it is hard and it is heartbreaking, but I'm telling you that the impact is greater on trans people. One more quick thing, I'm worried about the way this bill will interact with other bills, like Senate Bill 1216, the driver's license bill. If we are passing a bill that says that the state can deny driver's licenses to people while simultaneously passing a bill saying that trans people have to disclose their sex at birth on driver's licenses, I'm worried about the future outcomes of that for our trans Idahoans.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Misty. Are there questions for Misty? Seeing none, always a pleasure to have you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify today? Okay, seeing none, that completes our public testimony. Representative Young, if you would care to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Representative Julianne Young. I represent District 30, and I thank you for your time and your consideration of House Bill 421 today.
Bingham County.
You know, this is a fascinating conversation. And as we listen, part of what I'm hearing is that simply the establishment of a biology-based definition of sex, male and female, is in and of itself discriminatory, that it's hateful, and that it's harmful. I don't accept this premise. We ought to be able to have fact-based discussions around policy in a way that is still civil. We ought to be able to have discussions within the context of language that is clear and understandable and still be respectful. Acknowledging something that is evident is an important part of civil society, and that is what we are seeking to do today. In fact, what I hear is a desire to erase the distinction between male and female. And so I'd like to close, because I do believe that this should not be a partisan issue, although it appears to be, with a statement that I found particularly compelling when I read it in the amicus brief filed by WOLF, the Women's Liberation Front, in the Supreme Court case that was Harris Funeral Homes versus Amy Stevens. So this is a radical leftist feminist organization addressing the question that is before the committee today. They said, legally redefining female as anyone who claims to be female results in the erasure of the female people as a class. If, as a matter of law, anyone can be a woman, then no one is a woman. And sex-based protections in the law have no meaning whatsoever. If we can't define, we also can't protect. And I think that's important to keep in mind. So with that, I would urge your support for further civil discussion with House Bill 421.
Thank you, Representative Young. House Bill 421 is properly before the committee. Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we that we send to the floor with due pass recommendation House Bill 421.
Committee, we have a motion to send to the floor with a due pass recommendation House Bill 421. Is there discussion on the motion? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some comments. There's been some impugning in that if I support this bill, I do not support the constitutional rights of all. I want to be clear, I do, and I have defended those constitutional rights for all in courtrooms, and I will continue to do so. However, keep in mind, these common sense definitions are not new. They're not new definitions. They've been with us throughout history. I like the approach of science here that we have. There's XX and XY chromosomes. I like the idea of it brings faith. You brought in faith. Many of you have testified. I have a faith. Genesis 1:27 was mentioned. The Quran 49:13 was not mentioned, but that would be similar. And I like that this bill acknowledges the societal tradition of civilization throughout history, male and female. So I support the motion that's before us.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Further discussion on the motion, Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the issue I have is for people who don't have that identity, male, female, when they are born because it's just not there, and or that it's crossed over, the intersex people. And so when you say sex define sex as an individual's biological sex, either male or female, and you look at the definitions of, I assume that means to refer back to definitions of male or female. You're one or the other, and I think there's some people, and I've looked on the internet here, and it looks like 1 in 200 who are born with this intersex characteristic, and it's a tough thing to deal with. And these are new definitions. There's no question about that, because we're putting in definitions that weren't there before, so they're new definitions. And I think they need a little bit of work to recognize that there may be people that biologically, and I'm not sure exactly what that term means, but there may be people who just don't fit into this category of one or the other. And I think the definitions need to work that out. I mean, wouldn't it be simple if it did? But if there was one or the other, but there are people who are born who are not one or the other. I don't know. So I struggle with that.
Okay, I'll take that as debate against the motion. Okay, Representative Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Gannon. Just maybe to remind you, in my opening, I mentioned that both of the policy pieces that are included in this bill address specifically those rare disorders of sexual development. And so I acknowledge what you're talking about. I hear your concern, and I believe that those conversations need to happen in the context of clear language, and that they ought to be addressed in ways that are both compassionate and reasonable.
Is further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, the motion is to send House Bill 421 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The motion is carried. It will be done. Would you like to be recorded as voting no? Representative Coberly, Representative Gannon. Committee, that completes our work for today. We'll stand adjourned.